Hey guys, welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Emmy and I do videos on Paladin supports. So this video is going to be over Furia and it's going to be a full breakdown of her. I would like to talk about why it is not going to be Corvus, since that was who you guys voted on in the last poll. So when I posted that poll after my Lilith video went live, I had anticipated that the healing shift was not going to come to live Season 6 launch. The healing shift I'm referring to is on Grok, Grover, Pip, and Furia, and I had assumed that it was going to be something that was going to be left in PTS since a lot of the community didn't agree on how it was going. It was put into the Season 6 live servers, and I'm starting to think that it is going to be pretty permanent and coming to the rest of the healers soon. So I want to make a video that is up to date and can be used for quite a while. And if I make a video on Corvus and 3 months down the line they put the healing shift on him, it is no longer going to be a helpful breakdown. So we are going to start with Furia, as my Discord server voted between Furia and Pip, and Furia won. If you would like to be part of votes that are off the cuff and I don't usually post on my YouTube community section, you can join the Discord down below. We'd love to have you there. A lot of the people in the server often play with each other, and you can find really good parties of people to hang out with. Now understanding that, let's kind of head into the video, and we're going to kind of talk about Furia, and this is going to be a long one, so grab a snack, get a drink. This is going to be quite a detailed video. I am going to do it a little differently than my other healers, just because of this healing shift. The way I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the abilities, and then I'm going to go over the talents and the loadouts I use for each talent. So instead of there being a talent section and a card section, they will be together in each of the talents. I'll also be breaking down the defenses I use when I use each talent of hers, since they are so polarly different, and unlike some of my other healers, I have builds for specifically each talent. They're not very interchangeable. So now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's hop into the video. So Furia is the first in what I call the complex healers. Each healer has something individual about them, but some have extra things you have to manage besides just cooldowns. A lot of the early healers like Grok, Pip, Grover, Ying, Maldumba, Saris, and Genos all have cooldowns you manage. And each of them does have something unique about them, but after Furia came out, all of the other healers tend to be a little more complex. You have something more than just a cooldown that you're managing. So with Furia, you have your Wrath bar. With Io, you have Moonlight. With Corvus, you have his marks to handle. With Ray, you have to handle her Spirit Link, and with Lilith, you cast from her Blood Pool. So all of these healers after Furia really tend to be much more complex and much more resource management based, which I think is really enjoyable. It is not surprising to me that most of these healers have either been requested to have a video or have already had a video made on them on my channel, since they are a little bit harder to get the hang of. So let's start with Furia's passive, Wrath. Healing allies generates Wrath, which increases your attack speed and decays over time. Each tier of Wrath increases your attack speed by 10% up to 30% maximum increase. So this is not technically an ability in her kit, this is technically under her primary fire, but I am making it her separate passive right now, just so that we kind of get a grasp on what it is before we go into her whole kit. This bar down here right above your abilities is her Wrath bar. When using it, you'll notice that as you heal, it is going to go up. Every 10 hit points healed grants 1% of your Wrath meter bar. Overhealing, or healing someone who is at full health, will not generate any Wrath. It also depends how full it is on when it will start decaying. So over the years, Wrath has definitely been nerfed. The time has gone down a lot that it starts decaying. Right now, as of the first half of Season 6, we are sitting that Wrath starts decaying at 2 different intervals, whether the meter is full or whether it is not completely at 100%. If it is not completely full, it will start decaying after 2.5 seconds of not healing an ally. If the meter is full, it will take 7.5 seconds, and the Wrath will decay 10% every 1 second. So that's where we get into her primary fire, Pyre Blade. A Pyroforged weapon that deals 315 damage every 0.5 seconds in a burst of bullets with a medium spread. Has a maximum ammo count of 12 and is fully effective up to 35 units. So unlike a lot of other healers, Furia can actually headshot. Her headshot deals 495 damage comparatively to her 315 base damage, so that's a pretty good change. Though her weapon is a sword, it is basically a shotgun. It is really effective at close range. It can be okay at medium range, but at long range, you're getting lucky if you're dealing any damage at all. Think about this as a shotgun. You're going to want to fight up close and personal. You're not going to want to fight from too far away. It is not completely unviable at a medium range, but it is going to be much better whenever you're right up close to somebody. Her alt fire is Kindle Soul. Target an ally near your reticle and heal them for 850 and an additional 340 over 2 seconds. It has a range of 125 units. So, this cooldown is actually supposed to be 3 seconds. However, because of the animation that you have whenever you heal somebody, and it is not affected by chronos or death hands or any items, it's actually 3.32 second cooldown if you include that animation in there. This is her primary healing with no talent used. This is the only healing that she has in her kit. Standalone is actually a really good healing ability. I enjoy it. I think that it is simple to use, and sometimes the simplest things are the nicest. I also really like that it echoes the lore where her sister, Ceres, uses her same hand to heal. However, Furia does it in bursts and Ceres does it in long healing waves. So I think that that's really interesting and a really nice touch. Ability 1, Pyre Strike. Summon a beam of searing light that travels forward through obstacles. Enemies caught in its path are stunned for 1 second and take 400 damage. Remaining in the beam deals an additional 20 damage every 0.7 seconds. So your beam lasts 4 seconds and you can only stun one person per beam. So if you shoot out your beam and a maid gets hit and she retreats to the backline and the beam happens to hit her in the backline again, she will not get stunned a second time since she has already had the stun effect of that same beam. This is one of her main modes of defense. This is a really big part of what sets Furia apart from other healers. Her beam is such a big signifier of her playstyle and one of my favorite parts about it. There are so many ways to use this, and we're really going to get into that whenever we get into her talents. Her movement is Wings of Wrath. Propel yourself backwards and fire 3 projectiles that seek out enemies, dealing 200 damage each. You leap backwards 45 units. So first of all, you cannot be affected by knockback for this duration. For the time that you are in your animation or your ability is going off, you can't be knocked off a cliff or something. So when you're playing against an Ashe who has a kinetic build, that is a really good asset to use whenever you can see that she is gearing up to knock you off a cliff. Using your movement ability doesn't always have to be for movement, it can also be for self-preservation with Furia. Let's talk about the projectiles that come out. The projectiles are actually really great, and you can deal 600 damage to someone with that. That's a lot of damage, especially if you hit a flank with that. But when you use them, they are definitely not always reliable. The seeking is a little bit finicky. But something that can make them much more reliable is if you jump before using this ability. They fire in the direction of your camera and where your reticle is facing instead of just in a random direction where it thinks an enemy is. So it also, I've seen a lot of people say that it goes in the direction of your camera, but I also find the seeking ability on the projectiles to be much better whenever you jump. So this is an example of the exact same position. If I just regularly go backwards, they go straight into the floor, and that happens a lot with her projectiles when you don't jump. But if I jump, it is going to seek for much longer, and you can see that it went all the way down to that victor. So it is just going to be a much more reliable use in an offensive way if you jump every time and get into the habit of that. So I definitely recommend always being in a place and aware of your surroundings, because jumping can also mean that you are going to knock yourself off a cliff backwards. I've seen many people do this. Io and Furia's, they just, off a cliff they go. So with Furia's movement ability, why you should learn to jump, you should also be aware of your surroundings when you're doing so. Her ultimate is Inflame. Channel the pyre and become immune for 2 seconds. Afterward, increase the movement speed and damage done with weapons by 30% of you and your allies within 150 units. In addition, fully reload the weapons of all affected allies. This effect lasts 7 seconds. So there's quite a lot of things to talk about with this ultimate, starting with the very first line. Channel the pyre and become immune for 2 seconds. Lots of people love that line. However, I see people waste their Furia ultimates a lot. I've been guilty of it myself, but it's something you have to train yourself out of doing. Yes, you have immunity for 2 seconds, but using that ultimate exclusively to save yourself and not for the benefit of anybody else on your team is not going to save you. It's going to usually result in you ulting. Maybe your team can use that ult to their advantage and then you immediately dying after. Because especially when you're ulting alone, you're not doing any damage to that person while you're channeling the pyre, but you are immune for 2 seconds. So they're just going to shoot you immediately after, especially if they know how to time it. It's just not worth using your ultimate in this way. Don't do it. The other thing that I want to talk about in it is that it is 150 units. A lot of people think that it is map wide. It is like Ying's ultimate. You don't have to have line of sight. However, it is only people within 150 units of you. A lot of Furies I see will come out of spawn after dying and just immediately ult, thinking that the people on point are getting her ultimate. If it's a bigger map, that's not likely, and you just ulted and wasted it completely, because in the time it takes you to get to that point, because you've had to come off your horse, your ultimate's gone and no one else got it but you, and you spent that time walking. It does cleanse all status effects, but not on your teammates, only on Furia. So if you're slowed and you ult, you'll have that immunity for 2 seconds and it will cleanse all of your status effects. Just a reminder that that only happens to you and not your whole team. The last thing in her ultimate that is something that is super duper helpful is something that's actually not in the description, and it's how you can fly with this ultimate. This has been stated by a lot of different Paladins YouTubers, Paladins, staff. It is something that is semi-known, but if you jump before using your ult or you wall jump before using your ult, it will allow you to get vertical motion. This is a really good asset because it allows you to bring yourself up for those 2 seconds of immunity and put yourself on a ledge. These are times when it may be wise to use your ultimate when you're hiding from a flank. So when you use your ultimate and you jump up, it's going to send you up vertically. And you can get onto ledges or places that maybe flanks like Skye or Lex can't follow you without having to go a long distance around to do so. I still don't recommend using your ult to save yourself, but if you're in a situation and you have a teammate close by who is helping you kill them and you know that you just need those extra few seconds and there's a ledge right next to you, yeah, use your ult. It'll be helpful. There's clearly fights going on around you. So this is really the only place that I can see people using their ults to really save themselves and not hit a panic button. All of that said, this is a really, really fantastic ultimate. I would argue it's one of the best support ultimates there is. A lot of people don't feel that way, but I believe it is because they don't know how to properly capitalize on it. You also have to know what a weapon shot is, and players like Leon with a Furia are really, really fantastic, since all of Leon's abilities are weapon shots. So this is a really fantastic ultimate, especially when your team can coordinate and use it correctly. Let's talk about talents and cards. So unlike my normal breakdown videos, I am not going to be doing talents and cards separately. Because of how Furia is, you really need a special build for each one of her talents, especially since the healing shift. So I am going to go over each talent and then my card build for each talent and cards I think that are good to use with that talent. Something to state before getting into her cards is that Furia, unlike a lot of other healers, has such a fantastic card spread and really doesn't have many that just are really crappy. All of her cards can really be used in the right situation and can be used for different types of builds. There are so many ways to play her. So the builds I have just highlight the way I play, but that doesn't mean that it's always going to be good for you. So take these in context of how I play and what talents I'm using. We're going to start with her level 0 Cherish talent. Kindle Soul heals up to 18% additional health based on your ally's missing health, and its range is increased by 300%. It has Remedy, plus 10% healing, and plus 5% damage. This is her hybrid card. I personally used to play Kindle Soul exclusively. This talent was really her best talent. It fit into almost any map in any game, and the range is similar to Ceres's Mortal Reach, where it gives you that insane healing capabilities from across maps. Clearly you can't heal through walls, but on maps like Splitstone Quarry, Timber Mill, or big open maps like that, she really excels there with this talent. So when you're building a card deck around this talent, you're really going to want to focus on the cooldown of your Kindle Soul, buffing people with it, and the survivability against flanks who are coming to get you. So this is my build, and there are specific cards that are really important and cards that you should really consider keeping. So you're going to see ones like Ruthless. You really need to have this in your Cherish build, because your Wrath decays so quickly, and with Cherish, especially as you get further into Cauterize, it's not going to give you as much Wrath. So I would highly recommend keeping this card in your deck so it keeps you able to fight longer. It's especially going to decay when you're getting into a fight with somebody. You're obviously not healing a teammate as you're fighting most of the time, so you're going to need that survivability during your fights. Two cards that I really think are very helpful for builds like this are ones like Light Dawn, so it's going to buff your teammate while you are healing them. I know the shield is really low health, I totally get that. However, this can really save your teammate in a fight, and a lot of times when I'm healing a flanker a damage that's running to our backline, they are low, like super low, and they're being chased. So that extra 140 can be so incredibly helpful in those clutch moments, and it's still helpful to your point tank. The other one that I would highly recommend for this build is Light Force. Hitting Kindle Soul increases you and your target's movement speed by 10% for 1.5 seconds. Another great card. Light Force has been changed a lot over the years, but what it's landed on now is this movement ability buff. Definitely recommend it. The more movement you have of Furia, the better. She really is a big target for a support, so you're going to want that movement for your survivability. The other two that I use are Stoke the Fire and Fire Siphon. I really enjoy using Wings of Wrath a lot, even if I'm not in a fight. It does give you a lot of damage output, and when you're fighting a flank, you can always hit them with the classic Pyre Strike, use your Wings of Wrath, hit them with all three, and then you're going to have your Pyre Beam back usually if you're using Stoke the Fire. And since I'm using it at level 1, I won't have it back completely, but it will be much sooner. So that is a really great card to use, and using Fire Siphon heals me during that time. Now, the talent itself. Like I said, used to use this talent all the time, and it was a really enjoyable talent, and it made games really fun. It also was a really, really useful talent. It healed a lot, it had a lot of output. Now, since the healing shift, this talent is much less effective. It's not going to heal as much as your dedicated healing talent is going to. Solar Blessing heals more, even with the 18%, and so the range is really the only appeal here. I have found it much harder to win games with this talent. A lot of the games that I've played, I found myself winning 1 or 2 with it, but the majority of them I am losing because I just simply cannot keep up with the healing output of the enemy healer. This is still good for things like TDM. I do think that it is viable in some situations, but I hate to say that I think that until we get some kind of change to Cherish, or if they go back on the healing changes, I don't really know if Cherish is a very viable talent for now. At level 2, we have Exterminate. When Pyre Strike hits an enemy champion, it stops moving until it ends and deals up to 100% more damage to enemies under it, increasing based on the number of hits they take. This is her damage talent, Surgery. It gives plus 10% damage. So this talent has been controversial for a long time now. A lot of people think it should be removed from the game completely. It is a lower skill talent with really, really high rewards, so I can understand how people feel that way. This is when you're playing a pure damage Furia. You're not going to want to play this if you're trying to do a hybrid build, especially since they introduced Surgery. You're just not going to be healing that large amount. So building around your Wings of Wrath and your Beam are going to be your best bet here. Your weapon isn't going to do nearly as much damage to your abilities, so your cooldowns are really important in this. This is my loadout that I use for Exterminate, and you'll notice something interesting. First of all, I do use Ruthless, but not nearly as high. The really important cards that you're going to want to use are Stoke the Fire and Hollowed Sight. Hollowed Sight is super duper important because it generates wrath from your Pyre Strike, not just your healing. When you're playing Exterminate, you shouldn't be doing a ton of healing, especially if there's a second healer on your team who has taken that up. So you're going to be doing a lot more damage, but then that would take away from your wrath. This card fixes that. So you're going to be able to get wrath by hitting with Pyre Strike. And it says generate 45% wrath. Well, that's taking into account that each hit with Exterminate, when it is beaming on them, is a separate hit. So just hitting one person with your Exterminate beam is going to bring you all the way up to your full wrath bar. Stoke the Fire is the other one because it is so important to this build. It reduces the cooldown of Pyre Strike by 3.2 seconds for each successful hit of Wings of Wrath. So obviously I have a level up, that 3.2 seconds is what will change, but it is going to completely change how you play. Like I said earlier, a really good defense tactic is your Pyre Strike, Wings of Wrath, and then using your Pyre Strike again if you have it. Using your Pyre Strike and then immediately hitting an enemy with all 3 Wings of Wrath, which are stunned, so it should be easy to do, it will give you your Pyre Strike back almost instantly with a maximum of a 2-second cooldown if you have this at a higher level card. So that is extremely important to keep in your deck. Then you have the card Ignition, which I would keep in my deck, but you don't have to. Reduce the cooldown of Wings of Wrath by 1 second after hitting an enemy with Pyre Strike. As it goes up, that 1 second goes up. You can have a constant cycle of cooldowns because neither of these cards have a cooldown on them. So you could literally go up to somebody, hit them with your Pyre Strike. Once their Pyre Strike is on them, you're gonna Wings of Wrath. That's going to bring your cooldown completely down for your Pyre Strike. Then you're going to use it again. Once you use it, it's going to bring down your cooldown for Wings of Wrath. And you can do it all over again. But clearly that is a pretty vicious cycle. I also keep the card Solar Flare so that it's harder for people to get out of the range and it's easier to block doors with. So I like that card, but I understand not everybody needs it. So with this, you're obviously going to want to play a hyper aggressive, up close and personal. Clearly she has a shotgun and hitting Pyre Strike is much easier to do when you're right in front of somebody. So you're going to want to be up close and personal to the enemy team. And really your cards are going to depend on what items you need. If you are having a constant revolving cooldown of your Wings of Wrath and your Pyre Strike, you probably don't need Chronos. You can probably just phase that out of your items altogether because you no longer need it with the build that you have. This is why a lot of people feel that Exterminate is a little too broken of a talent, because when you get Furias who have thought through their whole build and have this very cheesy strat almost, it can be very, very frustrating to fight against, even with resilience. Her level 8 talent is Solar Blessing. Refiring Pyre Strike stops it in place. Any ally in its beam is healed for 150 every 0.5 seconds for 0.6 seconds. Additional hits refresh the effect. This has the curative. It is plus 20% healing. I have said in multiple different videos that I am not a fan of this talent. I am not too big to admit when I am wrong. And now that Season 6 has dropped, I am wrong. This is really the viable talent to use. However, I'd kind of like to go into why I still feel that it is very difficult to play this talent and difficult for me to say, yeah, go for it. Because this is such a complex talent and a complex ability to use. Like I said, before Season 6, I would tell you that this is garbage and you should just use Cherish and you're going to get more healing out of it anyway because you're going to miss your beam half the time and you just shouldn't even bother. However, with this new healing shift, it has become more viable even with her Kindle Soul than Cherish was. So let's get into how to play this, the numbers, what it means. Let's start with her Kindle Soul numbers. At base, she heals 850 health and an additional 340. We said that earlier. With this talent, she is going to heal 1020 burst and 408 over that 2 seconds. That is usually going to be higher than what you're going to get with Cherish, especially when you have Cauterize in play. When you're healing tanks, that's really going to be the only time that you're getting over this talent number. The reason that I always say I don't consider this talent very good is 2 reasons. First of all, it takes a huge tool out of Furia's kit. And a lot of people say, well, you can stop it on an enemy instead of a teammate. Yes, you can. However, that brings me to my next point. This is an extreme learning curve, and it is such a hard talent to really master. And fighting against a Furia who is a good Solar Beam Furia and their team is cooperative is scary. This is a very good talent, theoretically, but in practice, it's just not viable because it is so hard to learn. So let's dive into why is it difficult? Why is it hard? What do you have to learn? So let's start with the fact that you have to be able to anticipate your team's movements, and they're not always going to cooperate with that. So sometimes you'll put a beam on point and they'll just walk away from it. Either they don't realize it's there, they don't realize it's a healing beam, or they simply can't maneuver that area or don't want to. So there's a lot of reasons why they won't even get that healing from the beam. Then you have the issue of a lot of times you send a beam to somebody, it is from behind a wall. A lot of players don't know how to gauge that. First, you need to learn how to count seconds from behind a wall in your mind, subconsciously understanding where you need to stop that. It's not always going to be perfect, but playing this for a long time over time can give you that insight. But the problem is, you need to play that for a long time, and that means a lot of casual and bot games where you're not playing very well. And that's okay, but it can be very frustrating when that's the case for you and your team. You also can just watch for the healing numbers to pop up and stop your beam whenever you see the healing numbers start to pop. That is also very helpful, but you don't know how your team is moving when you do that. So why that is super helpful and a great way to figure out when you need to stop the beam, it is not a perfect way to do so. I did mention this earlier, but you can stop your beam on an enemy, and it is really helpful and it is a great defense tool. Clearly it is not going to do the damage Exterminate will, but it will give you the moment you need to kill whoever is there. It is not a perfect way, but it is a good way. You can also use the beam to block entrances. However, that is taking healing away from whoever may need it at that moment. On maps like Splitstone Quarry, you can take an entire entrance away from the team by just putting your beam there. It can block line of sight. If you have certain skins, it's very hard to see through them. And if they walk through it, they're going to get stunned there until the beam is gone. So it is helpful in some ways. It's a very push and pull talent. You really have to learn how to use it. In my experience, this is a talent that you really have to go all in. You cannot just kind of dip your toe in. You have to go all in and go for it and really learn it. I personally do not play Furia in ranked as of right now because I don't feel that Solar Blessing is reliable with how it also relies on your team being able to get in the beam. So just having this talent doesn't ensure that you're going to get hundreds of thousands of healing because your team may not cooperate. Just some other mechanics with this talent. It has a minimum duration that it will exist in a place after you stop it. So regardless of how far it had to go to get somebody, when you refire it, it will be there for 0.6 seconds, no matter what. And granted, the time it is there on somebody will heal them to full almost all the time. And it really scales well with Cauterize because of how much healing it is. But when you're placed against somebody like a Willow who has a dead zone, it definitely is a big weakness. It also recolors your beam from green instead of blue for your allies, so your allies can see the signifier that it is a healing beam. You will also see the little plus healing symbols in it, so you can clearly tell that it is a different type of beam. Okay, so my loadout for this talent looks something like this. I have altered it a lot over time, but this is what I've really settled on. The biggest importance is Solar Flare. It will give your front line a lot more room to move around and be able to get out of lines of fire if they have a bigger beam radius they can be in. The original beam radius is very, very small, and it also gives you kind of a cushion for aiming, because when you aim it, it will center on the person once you stop it. So the beam will detect that somebody's there after you refire it and kind of center on that person as they're standing. Other great cards are Ignition and Stoke the Fire. These are the ones that I also used in my Exterminate build. You can see that this is kind of a mix between my Exterminate build and my Cherish build, because you're kind of mixing the both together, because you have to rely on your Pyre Strike, but for a completely different reason than you did with Exterminate. I did not add Ruthless to this card deck, simply because you are putting so much healing out there. You don't need it, because you're healing people so often. If you do need it, you can swap out Burning Oath or Light of Dawn. One of those can go, and if you feel that you're not getting the Wrath bar that you need, you can always put Ruthless in here. So let's talk about the cards that I don't really like for any build, that I tend to not really use and tend to go unused for me. I don't tend to use any of the ammo cards like the Devout or the Pyretic. I just feel like her abilities are much more powerful than her weapon is a lot of the time, so I don't really rely on my weapon shots as much as I do my ability usage. Similar with cards like Inner Fire, I just tend to not use that either because it is an ammo buffing card. The other one that I really don't use at all because I feel that it leads to disaster a lot of the time is Righteous Path. A lot of times I end up seeing people with this card falling off of cliffs, and I feel like her movement ability is not always used for her movement, but more used for offensive. So I don't really think it's necessary to make it go farther when a lot of the time that's not even your goal. Now we are diving into maps. So looking at my map setup, some of them are a bit of a surprise. Ones that are usually ranked really low in my other videos are ranked super high, like Timber Mill or Serpent Beach, and that is simply because of how big and open they are. Same with Splitstone Quarry. When you're using Cherish, these maps are so good and helpful. Even if you're using Solar Beam, these maps are still great because of how you can get your beam to people and how there's not a ton of walls on the sides. It is easier to gauge how you're getting to somebody. Bright Marsh, Warder's Gate, and Ice Mines are similar to that, where it is really easy to gauge where your beam is gone. You can look up into the sky and you can see it. Bright Marsh, especially with Ice Mines, have really good blocking capabilities and really good defense capabilities for Furia, whether you're playing Solar Beam or Cherish. And if you're playing Exterminate, Bright Marsh is super great for that because of how compact the spaces are. You know they have to go in and out a door. So it's kind of hard. Like on Serpent Beach, it is a little more open. It's harder to play Exterminate on there, but it is great for Cherish. So each of these maps has strengths and certain talents, not necessarily all of them around. So you're going to find that Cherish is really, really good on maps like Serpent Beach and Timber Mill and Splitstone Quarry. Solar Beam can also be really good on these maps because it's easy to gauge. There's not really big, thick walls cutting off each area. So those would be ones that are really good for your Cherish or your Solar Beam. Moving on to the mid tier, you're going to get places like Ascension Peak, Bazaar, Stone Keep, Jaguar Falls, and Frozen Guard. It's just because these maps are big points like Bazaar or Ascension Peak. Jaguar Falls and Stone Keep have really good like lane areas, but it's kind of hard to heal on your outer lanes on left and right for the flanks. Frozen Guard is super covered and it's hard to gauge your beam, and Bazaar and Ascension Peak just are such big points that it's hard to keep that healing centralized where you need it. The worst maps personally on Furia would be Dawn Forge, Frog Isle, Shattered Desert, and Fish Market. These maps are either way too open to the point that it's like Solar Beam and Cherish don't go great here. Fish Market is a great example of that, where there's a lot of obstacles even though it's a really open map. So it's really hard to heal with Cherish, and Solar Beam is hard to thrive with here. Shattered Desert, same example. Very open, but a lot of random obstacles like statues. Frog Isle for me is super buggy for her because some places that look like you can heal through, you can't heal through. And it's hard to kind of maneuver around, and even using her beam here is not super great. Maybe I'm just not used to Dawnforge yet, but I just don't feel like Dawnforge is great for Furia. There's very few healers that work on it for me, and I can kind of go over that in the video later on the maps, but I just feel that she doesn't really excel here since her Wings of Wrath find a really hard time getting around with how many openings and doors and moving parts and crevices and all of these things. She does not excel here the way that she does on other maps. That is the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching the whole thing if you've made it to the end. I know that this was a really long one. I'd love if you would like and subscribe. I am on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I am hoping we can make it there. I really appreciate your guys' support. It means the world to me. I am going to post a poll on my Discord and kind of see what people want from me. I'm not going to post it on the community tab because I feel like in my Discord server I can have a better dialogue about it and kind of understand what you guys are looking for a little more and have some good conversation. So if you'd like to vote in that, head over to my Discord. I will make a community post where you guys can tell me about what you'd like to see next or what you would like me to wait to do. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!